It's Tanzu Tuesdays with your host, Robert Burley.
Thank you, Paul, for that wonderful introduction as always. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Tanzu Tuesday. We're so excited to have another installment for you. With me, as always, is Tiffany Jernigan, Paul Charkovsky. Hello, how are you?
Hi. Good. I'm enjoying. I like how all of us have beautiful, like sunset style backgrounds, and then Rob has all the colors from like all of ours together.
They don't let Rob out of the data center, so
sunsetting.
he's stuck there.
No, sunsetting in the data center, exactly. Well, yes, thank you for saying that. Welcome our guest and also our first outside guest, Rob Richardson. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing well. The first outside guest, yet mine's the only background that's not outside. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, you know, Paul and Tiffany always have their Austin and Seattle backgrounds, so I figured I might as well. This isn't Orinda where I live, but it's close enough. I'm 20 miles from San Francisco, so you might as well show the Bay Area, the big Golden Gate Bridge. So yeah, welcome.
Is there not some like iconic Orinda like view that would see it and go, oh, that's clearly Orinda?
I'm going to work on that. Trust me, I'm going to work on that. But no, actually, we have a really great old style theater, you know, with like the huge kind of tall, I don't want to call it a marquee because the marquee is with but you know, anyway, where the fluorescent lights are and it says Orinda on the side. So I'll find that and I'll put that on there. It's a great theater.
You could use
and I hope it stays in business.
You could use the side of the St. George Distillery.
That's in Alameda.
Well, but Alameda is what Orinda wishes it was, right?
That's true. And I wish St. George's Distillery was in Orinda because, well, actually, that would be a problem. Be a lot of liver spots. Anyway, back to Rob. Rob, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Where are you besides the data center in this wide world of sports?
I am in Phoenix.
Oh, very hot still.
That's why he'd be in the data center. It's hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's hot outside.
Yeah, it stays hot for a while there. But then, of course, like 8 months of it's amazing. So,
yeah.
How long have you been in Phoenix?
About 20 years.
Okay, so that's home. That's like super old school.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, congratulations on being home. I've always enjoyed. I have some friends that live in the Phoenix, Scottsdale, and Queens. What's it? Queens?
Queen Creek.
Queen Creek, there it is. I've only been there once, but
yeah,
I've got some friends that live out there, so it's always fun to go visit them and eat some really good food.
Yeah. It is. It's a fun town. It's warm, but it's really.
Yeah, I drove out there in my college tour. My freshman year, I went to junior college because I wanted to see what all my friends at their universities were like, and so I drove it in like May from San Diego after seeing UCSD to go to ASU, where I have a friend who was going there. And I had no AC in my truck. It was like a little 2-wheel drive pickup truck with pleather seats. And it was literally cooler to have the windows up than to drive with them down. It was unbelievable. So I was like, I don't think I'm coming here with this truck. I don't think that this is where I'm going to see myself. But
I do like it how people go, but it's a dry heat? As if like at 115 degrees, you care if it's dry or wet.
I lived in Florida for a summer as well. Like you basically live in your car, you go to your apartment or you go to your work. Like you just are going to air conditioning. That's all you're trying to do.
Yeah.
It did remind me, Bob, a few years ago.
Who were running from their heated car to their heated house to their heated office. Right. We run from our air-conditioned car to our air-conditioned house and then wear oven mitts as we drive.
Right, because the steering wheel's so hot.
Oh, yeah.
You just need like one of those kind of things that you put on top, but just like leave it in the house and then put it on when you go drive.
Top, yeah. Yeah, whatever oven mitt material is made of, that's what it should be made of.
Make the entire car of that. That's awesome.
Sorry, I gotta summarize my car.
The outside probably would still get hot.
Yes, that's true.
Bob, I had a Subaru Brat and it didn't have any air conditioning. And I was living in Australia, which gets quite hot. And which we actually call it a Subaru Brumby in Australia, but that's a whole different thing. Anyways, I ended up in the middle of summer having to drive a koala up to Steve Irwin's zoo. A koala that had chlamydia, to be very specific.
This is the most like every Australian probably had to do this, right? Like This is the most Australian story I've ever heard.
And I had that very
the
same
punchline is no air conditioning, not the koala with chlamydia.
Well, the punchline is with no air conditioning and a koala with chlamydia in the car with me. Let's just say that while koalas eat eucalyptus, they don't smell minty fresh.
No. Well, it's that Charmin joke with, like the bears that try to wipe their fur, with like it happens. That is an amazing story. And you're the one who told me that most koalas have chlamydia. They're just like, it's just a rampant
crazy high percentage of them. I guess I shouldn't talk too much more on a family show, but yes.
I thought you were about to say I shouldn't talk too much more about my family, but well, good. Well, I'm glad that you're safe and sound in your database in Phoenix, Rob. And where do you work? Since you're our first outside guest, I can't say, well, obviously you work at VMware. So where are you employed?
Where am I in Phoenix?
No. Like what are you doing, like job wise?
I'm a developer evangelist for MemSQL, a database company in the Bay Area.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah.
So we're amongst advocates. This is we're fam. Hashtag fam right here, advocate fam. Well, great. And how long have you been doing that? How long have you been able to do that?
About a year. I'm not here to sell their database, but it's a really, really cool database. It's everything that you've expected from SQL without the big, huge machines that are really expensive, because it's SQL, but it also is partitioned. So it scales horizontally rather than vertically. And that makes it really, really fast.
Listen, I have no problem with little shameless plugs. That was great.
Yeah.
You're amongst friends. And so what kind of got you into the tech world? I always like to go back to the beginning. What was kind of the early days?
Ooh, this is a fun story. So I am 10 years old. I'm in the library because they had the computer. It was so cool.
Right.
And the way it worked was you'd go to the desk and you'd go check out a disk and put it into the computer and you got to play that video game. So I was playing my video game and it was a lot of fun. I had kind of reached the end of this game, went up to the desk, flipped through the sheet protector sheets to find the next video game. And I found this drawing program. I thought it was going to be really cool. So this drawing program, I said, okay, can I play this game? And so they handed me an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that was on the top part of it, a grid, a grid of squares. And the goal was draw what you want in that grid of squares. And then the bottom half was the instructions of how to build that program on the machine. And so that was the drawing program, is go write the software to draw your picture. And it was so cool. I didn't turn that one back in. And that was when I began programming. That's when I began tech.
That's great. That's a great beginner story. And I think that it's so cool that nowadays we have obviously so many more opportunities for young kids to learn to code and to get their feet running early too. So great. Well, that's awesome. And we're excited to hear your thoughts on Kubernetes, because clearly that is the buzzword bingo of the, I'd say year and a half now. And, although KubeCon is not the buzzword bingo, because we were all excited to go to Amsterdam this year and that did not happen. And so, but we're going to get through our announcements and then we're going to turn it over to you and you're going to talk to us about Kubernetes. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Kubernetes didn't run on that first machine I was running on, but it runs on the machines now. So now we get to play. It'll be really
exactly. Fun. A nice distinction. All right. So here are our announcements tomorrow. So what you may or may not know of my friends out there, my Tanzunians, my twitch.vmware friends, we have been expanding this channel. So the twitch.tv/VMware Tanzu now has 4 different shows. We have Tanzu Tuesdays. Thank you so much for watching. And by the way, we should say hi to the Mother of Dragon. She's watching. We miss you, Tasha. Tomorrow, we have every Wednesday, which again, tomorrow is Wednesday at 12 p.m. We have Code, where one of our 4 Spring advocates will be just live coding and sharing a new process with you. And tomorrow is Josh Long, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Tiffany?
That is correct.
Yes, it should be up there by end of day today.
Okay, and it's the Road to Continuous Delivery. Is that the one we're talking about? A small town Spring developer advocate, Josh Long, has big city dreams of production, but learns he can truly escape where he came from, Bugsville, USA.
Exactly.
And then every Friday,
News just in, the website is updated. So you can go to tanzu.tv/code/5, and that will be his episode.
Wow. All right, because episode 5, crazy. Every Friday.
Ooh, updates in real time. It's like we have a DevOps pipeline that can deploy all of our things really quickly. That sounds awesome.
It's all happening, people.
It's like we do. We don't, but it's like we do.
Wait, so Paul, did you just update that?
Yeah, about 20 minutes ago.
I was doing it too. Thanks.
When one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. All right. So every Friday we have TGIK, which is not our show, but we stream it, our show. We have Paul and Tiffany have been on it. Thank goodness it's Kubernetes. So that's every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific. And then every day, whoa, Cote, slow your roll, buddy. He's trying to make us look bad. Every day we have a Tanzu talk with our world famous Michael Cote, broadcasting from Amsterdam. And that's daily at 11 a.m. Central Eastern Time. What does CET mean? Central Time?
Central European Standard Time.
Central European Standard Time? All right. So whatever that means to us translated, there that is. But there are previous episodes if you want to go back. If you want to go to tanzu.vmware.com/developer/TV, you will see all of our channels that you can go back to. And a brand new show that just opened up yesterday, right? Today's Tuesday, with our very own Nate Shuda, another advocate on our team. He brought in Venkat and they talked. It's called Between Chair and Keyboard. And go to our tanzu.vmware.com/developer/TV for all updated information. All right, a couple more announcements. One more. Spring One Tour is happening this month with Mark Heckler. I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, but Tiffany's here to pronounce it correctly for me. Spring Boot Omakase. Omakase?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Fast-paced chef's choice. Dive into fun and useful topics. And it's got really delicious looking spring rolls, I'm going to call them, but Spring Boot in the middle of the roll on the Spring One Tour page. And that is October 21st and 22nd. It's free. It's going to have Mark Heckler, Greg Turnquist, Violetta Georgieva, and Dave Sire, the Dr. Dave Sire. I don't know why doesn't have the doctor in there. I mean, you don't go to doctor school and not be called doctor. And again, that's October 21st, 22nd. Registration is free, but you do need to register if you want to participate in Q&As and stuff like that. It's, again, 2-day event, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And then day 2 is we have a grill side chat, fireside chat, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And so that'll be amazing. Mark Heckler is incredible, and all the other people that will be adding their input are also incredible. And then that same week, that's the 21st, 22nd, we have Cloud Foundry Summit, CF Summit. The EU version, it's all again virtual, but it's the 21st and 22nd. So yeah, same days as the Spring One Tour. But if you go to cloudfoundry.org/events and /summits, you can sign up for that. Lots of incredible stuff happening in the Cloud Foundry universe. And we will be actually having a follow-up conversation about that on our show the Tuesday afterwards. So we're trying to be mindful of events that are happening either within our purview or out of our purview and keep conversations rolling in that direction, which will remind me that we just had VMworld, everybody. That was a big deal, September 29th through October 1st. And you can go view those episodes on demand. If you go to vmworld.com, I'm sure you can figure out how to navigate that. Paul had his on there. Tiffany had an episode on, or a presentation on there. Yeah, I mean, right? You both had stuff on there.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, it sounded like you had a question. I did? you said I did with a period. Got it. And next week, we're going to be bringing in the Vanguards, which are VMware's kind kind of partners that use our products, and they're going to talk about what they loved about VMworld and how that might integrate with their using of Tanzu as well as other VMware products. So that's exciting. And that's next week on the Tanzu Tuesday.
Yeah, that's very cool that we have customers that act as advocates on our behalf, which is always a good thing.
And that one is going to be up in a little bit.
They're the ones using it. So, that one's not up on there. Got it. Yes, exactly. So, I think we have 4 or 5 different advocates coming out from the Vanguards talking. So,
there's 4.
Did I miss anything, everybody?
I think you're good. How about we all
let's
turn our cameras off and turn it over to Rob.
Rob, we're excited.
That's a lot of stuff you've got coming up. That's really cool.
We got to stay busy in this world of confusion that we're in right now. So,
yes.
The conversation started as, what do we have coming up to? Oh, we have all this.
We have all the things. All the things.
Yes.
So, all right. Well,
over to you.
Off to you. Yes.
Let me share my screen. Okay, here we go. This is going to be so much fun, making Kubernetes how we build things. This is my one and only slide here in Notepad. And all the rest of this is live demos, which is really cool. So live demos, Docker image list. Yep, Docker's still connected. kubectl get all. Kubernetes is still connected. Perfect. So this is a talk all about developer time tools to make you more productive in containers. Containers are typically a thing that will leave to those DevOps people over there, or will consider it an implementation concern of moving into production. And that's interesting, but what if the problem is the mechanism of how we communicate in the containers, or the problem only happens if we are running in a container? How do we handle that? And so that's exactly what we're going to dig into today, is a bunch of tools that allow us to start easier, run differently, rebuild faster, visualize content in containers, visualize our cluster, and ultimately debug inside of containers. So we're going to take a look at all these types of tools that allow you to be more productive as a developer with containers, rather than assuming that it's going to come later. That's really cool. Let's dig in. The first thing that we want to do then is to start an app. So here's an app. I just went to nodejs.org. I copied their hello world. I created a Docker file that will get this into a container, and life is good. So now I come back to my command line and I say docker build -t. Oh wait, what does -t mean? Is this where I need to do the -p? No, wait, I don't need to do -p. I need to do hello-node. I'll give it a version of 0.1. Oh wait, I forgot the dot. I need a dot. What does the dot mean again? So I'm already confused. Okay, so now I've got my container built. Now I'm going to do a Docker run. Now I don't need the -t. I need a -p. So, okay, 80:80. Oh wait, no, it's not 80. It's 3000. Wait, no, the 3000 goes on. And so remembering all of these things of what is the build command and what is the run command, that's a lot of effort involved in not building business value. So instead, let's go into that directory, and I'm going to say Docker compose up. So what is Docker compose? Well, this one's one of those easy ones, but it's one of those really helpful ones. Here in this YAML file, this Docker compose file, I list all of the pieces of both the build and the run components. So build, I want to build out of the current directory. Here's that dot. The -t, what do I want to tag it? I want to tag it this. Okay, now when I'm getting ready to run, I want to do the -p, the 3000:3000. And then I didn't even get to the environment variables. I totally forgot that part. Here's that environment variable that I want to kick off. And so now in my terminal, it looks like I'm getting started, almost ready to go. And then I go off to localhost 3000, and I'll be able to see my container. There we go. So that was really cool. And let's actually change this to Tanzu Tuesday and spin that down and spin that back up. And I can do all of those pieces to quickly start and stop my containers. I didn't have to remember all of the commands again to get in all of the things. Docker compose down, and now my container is gone. One of the things that Docker compose does that may be a little bit weird is it will create a new network every time. And so if you have multiple containers or multiple Docker compose files, it's like, well, how do I get those things to talk to each other if they're not all part of the same Docker compose file? Here's this network mode bridge command. And this one says, don't create that new network. Use the existing bridge network that we already have. And so that's that mechanism inside Docker Compose that will allow you to avoid creating a new network per compose file. In many cases, you may want this new network, but now that I've got no network, then I can Docker Compose up. And I can link this to other systems that I may have going or other Docker Compose files. It'll take care of building it if it doesn't exist. It'll take care of running all of the pieces. And now I come back to localhost 3000 and I've got that part ready to go. That was cool. So how do I start easier? I create a Docker Compose file. Next up, let's talk about running differently. Docker Compose down. Let's finish off the previous example. So Docker Desktop is kind of our go-to piece for installing Docker and Kubernetes. If I have Docker Desktop running, I can fire up the Docker Desktop settings, and I can get to this screen where I can go turn on Kubernetes mode. And so from here, I can show all the details of Kubernetes. I have both a Kubernetes cluster and a Docker runtime. Everything's great inside of Docker Desktop. But this isn't the only tool that I can use for this. What we're running right here is Minikube. And Minikube is an alternate runtime where I can get similar types of experiences. You can think of Docker Desktop as like the easy button. I just fire it up and it just works. But with Minikube, a lot more of the pieces are exposed. The system containers aren't hidden by default. It's running on a different port, so all of the, or a different URL. So all of the automatic proxying between localhost and your VM is gone. So you get to see more of the innards of how this works. So you'll see that what I did is I said localhost, but I was actually going to Minikube :3000. This Minikube system is right here. It's one of the virtual machines running on my machine. And so, by the way, I could have many different Minikube virtual machines for different purposes. Minikube, or you could also run micro K8s, or you could run K3s. All of these are different Docker runtimes that allow you to do Docker and Kubernetes-like things in really interesting ways. If Docker Desktop works for you and you like the easy button, then that's perfect. But if you'd like other systems, then Minikube can be a great thing to do. Once I do the Minikube start, then the next step is to do a Minikube Docker env. And here's the environment variables that I'll need to be able to set my shell to be able to work with that Docker environment. Once I've got those set up, Docker image list, and I'm ready to go. I'm connected. The cool thing about Minikube Docker env is I can pass in a shell. In this case, I said PowerShell. Or if I'm running in a different shell, for example, this shell, then I get these environment variables that are specific to the command prompt. So I'll grab these environment variables and set them, and now I can Docker image list. Now I can get out the details that I need with Docker. So that's really cool. Minikube is a great alternate runtime that allows me to run Docker in Docker and Kubernetes in a different way. One of the things that I found that is great about Minikube, in addition to kind of exposing all of the widgets, is this. Minikube SSH. Now, Docker specifically bars you from getting into the mayhem of how it works. Minikube does not. It wants to show you all the things. So Docker image list, if I'm looking at these images or Docker container list, and I'm like, well, where is that volume that I need to, I can go wander through var data, nope, cd var docker, nope, that's not it. I can start wandering through all of the things to look at exactly where that content is on my drive. It is much more open than Docker Desktop. So that's really cool. Minikube allows us to do some great things. Now, it isn't the easy button, so all of the proxying of things going back and forth aren't there. We saw the difference between using localhost and Minikube. But also, if I want to map drives, then I'll run this. There it is, Minikube mount, and I'll mount a folder from my local machine into that Minikube virtual machine. And now I have that available. So Minikube SSH, cd mnt, and we'll see the directory right there, this node app directory that I've mounted for my local machine. We can do that with Minikube, and we can go start poking at it. So node app, here's this folder that I have on my local machine right here. And all of the content that I have here on my local machine is now available to this VM. So Minikube, that is really cool. Quick rebuild. So we did, we looked at how we could use Docker Compose to automatically rebuild things. But here's another tool that is really, really powerful. This is Scaffold. And we can think of Scaffold kind of like a Docker watch. Now, there isn't such a command as Docker watch, but once we do a Scaffold init, it will create this YAML file. And here's this scaffold.yaml that tells me all the things that I need to do. So it's going to watch my current directory. And if anything changes in this current directory, it will rebuild this image and it'll publish this k8s YAML file. So here's this k8s YAML file, and it's doing all the things. It's looking for port 3000, sending it off to port 3000. So let's go find what node port it had. kubectl get all. Here's that node port. So 3000 mapped to 3200. Minikube. Here's my app. And it's just going to say hello world. Well, last time when we wanted to change it, we had to, take it all down and put it all back up. Hello, Tanzu Tuesday. Automatically, it's going to notice that change. It's going to rebuild my container. Optionally, it can push it up to a registry, and then it'll tell my server to go restart it. So now I'm just going to push refresh. And if I catch it in the right mood, it will automatically update, of course, cache being a thing. It'll automatically update that server. Caching is going to be the death of me. Okay, so that was really cool to see Docker Watch. Now, it's not Docker Watch, it's Scaffold, but that is really, really cool. Actually, let's Docker container list. Make sure that we've got those down. Yep, cool. So we're able to quickly rebuild. One of the things that I did here in my initial one was I have this Docker file that copies in everything from my local directory into my current directory. Now, what got copied into place? I don't know. Here's a tool that is really helpful for visualizing the contents of containers. This tool is called Dive, and it allows me to look through all of the files that are in each layer of my Docker file. Now, as we build up Docker files, it will use each of these layers to be able to add various things to my system. So I just said dive, and I looked at that hello world container, and now I can wander through the layers. Now, these are the layers of the thing that happened before mine. And so here's mine, where I start off workdir app, and here's all the files that came in. So I can go wander through. Let's close that one. Let's close that one. Because it said workdir app, this app folder is new. And so that's really cool. Let's go into the next one where it copies everything. So I've copied everything into the app directory, but it looks like I got the Docker file and the Docker compose file into my container. That's probably not what I want. That's hard to see until you remote into the container or do other things. Here with Dive, I'm able to see it straight away. So I have this thing. I can say, well, let's only copy server.js. Or I could go a different directory, different mechanism and create a .docker ignore file. And here I could say, yes, I'd like you to ignore node modules, and I'd like you to ignore the Docker file and .git and docker compose.yaml. And because I now have this Docker ignore file and this Docker file, then as I were to come rebuild this container, I would see that it now only has server.js. It's hard to visualize the various things that come in as part of this, and that's where Dive is so helpful. It's also just a console app, so Control-C, and I'm back to my console. Dive is a really cool tool to be able to look into the depth of all the containers that we have. Next up, let's talk about visualizing clusters. Where am I? Five. Okay, so that didn't work. Oh, yes. Up. So while that starts up, how would I visualize my cluster? Well, if I'm in Docker mode, I may choose to use something like Portainer. Now, Portainer is really helpful in being able to see the contents of our cluster. And if new in Portainer, they actually have the ability to visualize Kubernetes clusters rather than just in Docker mode. But this is really cool, being able to see that thing. So I've got this running, and it's running on port 9000. So let's come over to localhost 9000 and take a look at Portainer. Now, this is the first time we've logged into Portainer, so it asks us to set a password. Oh. There, now we've got that created. Now it talks about where do we want to connect to. We could connect to a remote repository if we wanted to, a remote cluster, or in this case, we want to run our local cluster. It tells us about how we needed to map our Docker socket. We've already done that with the Docker compose file. Isn't it nice? We didn't have to remember all the details. And here's that local cluster. We can take a look at the containers that are running, and that's interesting. Let's go start up that container that we had going. So here's that container, Docker compose. Actually, let's do a Docker run -p 3000 hello world v0.1. Okay, so now we've got this, nope, not hello world, hello node. Now we've got this other container running, which is really cool. So coming back to this dashboard, let's refresh this, and we can see the hello node container. That's perfect. It's running on port 3000. Let's dig into it and see what it's doing. So if we click on logs here, we can take a look at the console output. It says it's running on port 3000. That's really cool. We can take a look at some of the events that happened in this container. which is cool. Stats around it. That's really fun. One of the other pieces that's really, really cool is the console. Now, this is an Alpine-based console, so I'll switch to Ash, and I'll connect to it. And now here I am inside this container. There's my app. I can do PS-A and take a look at the processes running in this container. I can just kind of poke around and get a feel for how this container works. That's perfect. Pop back out. And now if I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, yeah, I don't really want this container. Let's remove this container. Yes, I want to remove any non-persistent volumes connected with it. And now this container is no longer running in my cluster. It might be interesting to start to visualize your cluster. Did you really understand that many containers were part of the Kubernetes control plane? That's kind of cool to see. So Portainer is really helpful in being able to visualize a Kubernetes cluster. Let's take that one down. And if we were to flip over into Kubernetes mode, let's start up this one. Now, kubectl get all. This one will run on port 80 and Kubernetes is automatically going to map it over here. So let's go to localhost :32,648. And now we have a process where we're asked to enter our authentication token. As part of installing k8s-, it will create a secret. So let's copy that secret into place and authenticate into the dashboard. This is cool. We can take a look around in our namespaces. So right now in our default namespace, there is a bunch of old things that were running but aren't running anymore. That's a good thing to see. Backing up into the kube system, we can see all of the containers that are running right now. Here's some containers with some interesting annotations and events. One of the things that I like doing in here is looking at storage. What are the volumes that I have? It's really easy to accidentally leave volumes around, and k8s- can help us discover those. The other thing that's really fun in here is to look at accounts and then secrets. We're in all namespaces right now, so we're seeing all of the secrets, but check out all those secrets. That's kind of a lot of secrets wandering around in my cluster. Do you know where your secrets are? If I switch over to default, here's the k8s- token. So here's that secret that I used to log in. Actually, here's the secret. And right now it's hidden because it is indeed a secret. But that's really cool to be able to visualize the Kubernetes cluster. Now, Kubernetes does come with a dashboard that allows you to see the things in your cluster, but it doesn't have authentication turned on by default, and it allows you to change your cluster. And it's really easy to accidentally expose that dashboard in an unauthenticated way. And that's how your cluster gets to be a crypto mine. So if that dashboard is working for you, then that's great. If you'd like to step up to a different dashboard that gives you a little bit different view, then k8s- might be a good alternative. So we've got k8s- started, kubectl delete -f k8s-, and now that dashboard comes back down. That's cool. If I come back here and I refresh my dashboard, yep, it's off. So I can spin it up as long as I want to visualize my cluster, take a look at that cluster, and then turn it back off. So next up, we've seen how we can visualize clusters. We've seen how we can visualize containers. Can we debug inside of a container? I have this folder right here, and let's open this in a new VS Code. Open with code. Now this folder, I also have the remoting extensions installed. So remote, here's remote WSL if you want to remote into a WSL container. not container, into a WSL share, or you can remote into an SSH share. In this case, I'm using remote containers. And remote containers is really, really cool. Because I have remote containers, I've built this .dev container folder. And inside the dev container folder, I have this dev container.json. This dev container.json explains how my cluster or how my workspace will connect to a particular container. Now that's really cool. I can click here and I can start to connect to it. But before we connect to it, let's come in here and we can say remote containers, try a sample. Now, when I choose try a sample, I can choose my programming language of choice, and I can fire up a container that is in that language, that has all the build tools and debugging tools associated with that language. And that will get me really quickly into this. That will generate the dev container.json to do all the things that I need to do. Now, in this case, I've already built the dev container.json, so I can say I would like to reopen in containers. Now, reopen in containers will go download the container if it needs to. It will spin it up based on the details that I have inside that dev container.json. I like showing the logs because it actually goes and pulls the pieces. And this isn't, VS Code Docker. This is actual Docker. It's doing all of the Dockery bits to get Docker spun up. It's also mapping volume into that container from my local machine so that I can start to execute, so I can start to interact with the code that's running in the container. But what's really cool is now inside the container, I have all of the node tools that I need to be able to debug this node process. That's perfect. Let's create a shell in here and just kind of play with it. pwd ls uname-a. This is a Linux box. It is running inside this container. And I have this application then that is built to be able to debug. Hello, Tanzu Tuesday. Now I would like to debug this. Okay, so now I have to do the -p and all of the other details. Well, all of those have kind of been hooked up for me. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to push play the way I always would. And I'll set a breakpoint right there. It says server running at localhost 3000. It's proxying it. So in this case, it's not Minikube, but it is really localhost 3000. So if this was running on a remote cluster, then that proxy would go across just fine. Now I've hit my breakpoint. Let's take a look at the variables. All of the things that I would associate with debugging my application are exactly as I would expect. I can, hit F10 to go to the next line. I can push step over, step into. We looked at variables. We do have the debug console. So let's say console.log request.url. And there's the URL of my server. Request.orig, nope. Raw URL. What is it? Well, URL gets us host name. Nope. Request.headers.host. So there we go. Oh, that was undefined. We can do all of the particulars that we're used to inside of our debugging environment, but all of this is running in a container. I push play and now it renders. Here's that hello Tanzu Tuesday. All the pieces that I'm used to, because this is a mapped volume, now back in my original folder here, it says, hello Tanzu Tuesday. Hello world. And back in my container, I've got hello world. It's mapped into place. But now inside my container, I have all of the development tools from whatever tool set I've defined. Do I need a special debug tool? Do I need a version that is incompatible with the one that I have installed on my machine? All of that is possible because I am running here in this container, but I'm running in the normal way that I would expect. Let's push stop and I'm back to coding. This dev container is really cool. Here's that dev container JSON to take a look at how that builds. I've just specified the forwarded port, so I'd like it to proxy port 3000. I could specify other ports because this is an array. I've chosen settings that I want for my editor. So I want the font size to be bigger and the tab size to be this. I've specified the Docker file that it needs to launch. So here's the Docker file that it's going to run. And in this case, it just sets a few things. I want to APK update, and I want to add Git and curl in case I want to do some Git options here with my repository. I could also specify other things either in my Docker file or in my dev container JSON. Like in this case, because I'm using Minikube, I need to very carefully bind mount my folder that I've mapped. So /mnt/node_app is the one that I chose to bind here. I chose to map this folder into mount node app, and this will then grab mount node app and map it into place inside of Kubernetes. And now from there, I can just build the things that I want to build. If you're running on Docker desktop, then your dev container.json could be really, really simple. Just specify the Docker file. In this case, I have a post create command of npm install so that I can get all of my npm packages in my container. But you could also specify other VS Code plugins that you want to run. So what's interesting here then is this VS Code actually is running in two pieces. There's the part of the VS Code that is local on my machine that is that user experience point of view. And then there's the piece of VS Code that is running inside of the container that allows me to connect to it. So it's going to map that volume, and then I can edit all of the content in the container. I can debug in the container. I get the same type of rich remote experience that I expect from VS Code, port it off into my local machine. If you want to dig into other runtimes, like if I wanted to do this on a remote host, in this case, I'm not running Docker Desktop, I'm running Minikube. So I also set some settings here where I can say, oh, and by the way, my Docker instance is right here. And all of that is available baked into VS Code with this remote extension. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say close remote connection. And now I've shut down that container. And all of the code that I have locally is still right here on my local machine. So we looked into tools that allow us to do lots of really cool things. We looked at tools that allow us to start easier, to run differently, to rebuild faster, to visualize container contents, to visualize cluster contents, and ultimately to debug inside containers. Hopefully what you'll see is that containers aren't that thing that has to happen over there, but rather you can integrate your development process into a container workflow and really take advantage of containers to make you much more productive. What are our questions?
Hey, so we haven't had any questions as such.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of folks commenting on, let me see, Physium said he would love your PowerShell config.
Yes.
And then
Yeah, when I first saw this, and I mentioned this to you before we started, I was sure you were running WSL or something, because that so looks like a prompt from like ZSH or Starship or one of the more advanced Linux shells. And so my mind kind of exploded when you kind of told me it wasn't Linux.
This is two things. It is poshgit, and oh my posh. Oh my posh. And Scott Hanselman, poshgit, oh my posh, actually did a really great video on creating this custom terminal. And that was the thing that I followed, which is really cool. At that point, then I have all of these themes pre-installed. So Paradox is the one that he really likes. So if I set theme Paradox, then now I have Scott Hanselman's prompt.
Nice.
And now I get interesting things like how many commits ahead or behind am I on my branch, which is really cool. Get theme. I customized Agnoster. So here's the default Agnoster. And that was set theme. There we go. In this case, I don't have the prompt on the second line, which makes it really interesting. If I do a docker build -t and I keep going, then that starts to wrap. So I'm like, I'd kind of like it to have my command on a separate line. So I just hacked up the PowerShell file at that path. And here's my theme that puts it on another line. If I'm in a demo where where Git is less relevant, then now here's the shell without all of the Git details, and it's just now on a second line.
Very
nice.
Posh is magic.
Yeah, I've come across that Scott Hanselman stuff before, and I figure with me about to get a new machine and my thoughts of running Windows, I'll probably be watching a bunch of his videos to try and get a experience that's a bit like what I like on Linux, but isn't necessarily just faking my way through pretending I'm Linux.
Yeah. Another thing of marrying it with Windows Terminal is I can do interesting things here, like let me start an Ubuntu shell in WSL2 straight away, or an cloud shell connected to my Azure account. And that's pretty sweet too.
Look at all these tricks.
Magic.
Yeah, and Dev Retro said a much needed tutorial.
Yeah, this is great. I think you're just blowing everyone away in the best way possible.
What was the
That's
tool?
Wonderful.
I kind of spaced for a moment, and you were showing a tool that looked like it was looking at inside the Docker image. What was that tool?
That tool is called Dive. Here is a website for Dive. And once you say Dive space your container name, now you can go wander through all of the layers. Let's do that again, because that was really fun. Dive, hello node. And it will pull this from a registry if it needs to. In this case, it doesn't. And now I'm looking through all of the layers of my container. So I only have a few layers here, but here's where my Docker file begins, where I say workdir app. There's a layer of 0 bytes, which is really cool. I noticed that none of the files changed. Nothing is green in this case. Switch over to this layer where I started copying everything, and I'm like, I copied too much. I can go adjust that.
Cool.
Very cool. Yeah, I like getting really good visualizations on the command line. And so seeing this sort of stuff is so great, because sometimes you kind of need an almost graphical view to see this kind of stuff. And so to get that without having to load up a full-on GUI or whatever and just doing it from the command line, it's super great.
Yeah. And it's like, what's this stuff in the temp folder? Do I need that? Well, did it come in on my layer? It didn't. It came in, let's back up a little bit. It came in on this layer, APK add. Oh, hey, that's probably when I did that curl. Oh, that's part of the node Alpine image. But I'm like, okay, so I could probably go delete that too.
This is so nifty.
Yeah. So, I've done a lot of image optimization stuff, and I haven't come across this tool. And what you've just shown me has made me realize I've never even thought to just make sure that /temp is empty, which I guess is looks like it's an Alpine APK specific thing. I guess I often use Ubuntu, so I'm used to finding the depackaged stuff and cleaning that out. But I think I'm going to be using this tool a bit to help make sure my images don't have a bunch of cruft in them.
It is really cool.
You've converted Paul and Tiffany. This is incredible.
I was wanting to find something that did this. I just didn't know how to search for it.
Yeah. And so that's the magic, hopefully, of this talk is we looked at, hopefully I'll give you the Google search terms, Minikube and Scaffold, the tool that does the Docker watch. This is Dive, the one we were just looking at, which is really cool. Portainer, which allows us to look at clusters. KDS Dash, that alternate Kubernetes dashboard. And then the Visual Studio Code remoting extension that allows us to debug.
Yeah, the Visual Studio Code one is really cool. I've read about it. I've never actually seen it in action. And seeing it in action reminds me just how mind-blowing it is, like getting the ports and volumes and everything all lined up and then kind of getting a VS Code server running inside your container. Yeah, it's very cool.
If you've ever played with a Raspberry Pi, it's interesting, but it's always like, okay, let me SSH into the box and VI some file. And it's like, VI is interesting, but it's also a random number generator. I've heard one of the best ways to get random characters is to put a junior dev in VI and say, can you exit?
Right.
That gets really crowded and really clunky. But instead, hook up VS Code and hook up the remote SSH extension, and you can do the same process, but debugging inside your code running in the Pi. And so it's not like you build it locally and then push it up again and push refresh and hope it goes okay. You can actually debug your Raspberry Pi code. It is magic.
It's very cool.
I'm just like, I'm going to watch this all over again later.
Well, I think that's what this means too, is we'll put you on the list to bring you back, Rob. I think that's another for certain. So this is great.
Most definitely.
Our first outside person, and you knocked it out the park. You set the bar real high for anybody who wants to come in the show. So this is great. This is really, really great.
Yeah.
Again, if anybody wants to go back and watch this, we will have it up on our YouTube channel, which you can obviously access through our tanzu.tv. So that'll be up tonight or tomorrow, but very shortly. And all of our past episodes are also on there. And again, next week, we're going to have our Vanguards talking about what they loved about the VM world. We're trying to create a show around these Vanguards and hopefully bringing in, there's like 140 of them that are on the Vanguard team that work for other companies and advocate for VMware and the different products that they use. So tomorrow is kind of like next week's like a nice practice run, and hopefully we can kind of create a show to kind of get more real life conversations happening with using these things in like production environments where it matters and it's not just a hello world app type of a thing. So it's really exciting. Yeah. So tune in next week for that. Follow Rob at Rob_Rich. And yeah, thank you all so much. Paul, Tiffany, do you have anything else?
Nope. No, I made the PR. I just need someone to approve it for next week.
Excellent.
There you go. Rob? This entire presentation was done inside of a VMware Workstation VM.
Look at you.
Very cool.
Look at you dropping the great names. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Rob. It was an honor to have you on the show, and we look forward to seeing all our Tanzunians next week.
Sounds great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.